What's up everyone, Mike here, back with another demo. Today we're going to talk about supercharging one of my least favorite yet very important steps in software development, and that's creating release notes. And to do so, we're going to use a lot of the same setup that we have from my past few demos, and that's an AI assistant that's able to call tools directly on my Drupal site to make changes, to create content, edit content, so forth. But in addition, we're also going to connect to GitHub so that we can call tools on that side, and we can load context like information about the repository, information about individual tags and releases, and even information around individual commits, so that context can be used to help do the things I'm asking it to do on the Drupal side. So let's jump in a little bit to the initial setup that I have here. I've got Drupal CMS installed pretty much vanilla out of the box. The few changes I've made, I've created a content type for release notes. It's pretty straightforward. I've got an overview field that's just a place to summarize the kind of highlights of a given release in like a paragraph form. I've got a project taxonomy term reference here so that I can tag it with a project name so I can relate multiple releases together. I've got a long text field for actually listing out the individual issues, which would include the issue ID, a text string kind of explanation, as well as a link to the actual commit itself. And then I've got a plain text field for tracking the release version number in. Additionally, I've installed the Tool API module, which is really one of the modules I'm trying to highlight in this demo. And this module is about exposing executable actions, not only in ways that like you could call deterministically in programming, but that you could also surface in UIs, or you can surface in AI for AI to be able to call directly. And so right now, these tools are focused very much around content creation. That's creating content, editing content, deleting content, relating content, publishing content, unpublishing content, creating new revisions, translating content, and so forth. But in time, the goal is to write tools to cover really all of Drupal, and then just provide the tools you need as necessary, whether that be to your assistant directly with MCP servers, or being able to use these tools inside of agents and allowing the agents to be used just to describe some of the nuance to how these tools relate, instead of needing agents to really make the tools work at all. And so that's been a big focus of the Tool API. Is my feeling is that if we can make tools defined extremely well, it makes agent building and agent reliability that much better in the long run. And so as mentioned in this test, I'm using MCP, which is basically the protocol for connecting the assistant so that it can call these tools. And I'm just giving it all the tools and saying, hey, sort it out. So in time, again, I think like most likely you'll be surfacing a lot more agents instead. But if we can make this work with just tools to start, it just makes it that much better once we supercharge this with actual agents and prompts and explanation to things that are unique to Drupal or your specific environment. Additionally, I've copied over the Drupal AI module into a GitHub repo, just a private one for kind of playground and sandbox stuff. And then I've copied an older module of mine called Smart Content into GitHub as well in a private playground so I can mess around with it there. So let's next jump into the assistant side. I'm using Claude for this. In terms of settings, we'll just jump in and show you this real fast. If I go down to developer, I can see the actual MCP servers I have it connected to. What this means is it's connected to my Drupal site. It can see and call the tools that are available there. It's also connected to my GitHub, and it has tools there that's able, again, to call and get information from. A good way to get started is we're just going to throw in a new chat, and we're going to say, give me a list of MCP tools you have available. This will tell us that it is able to connect both to the GitHub MCP server as well as the Drupal MCP server and get a good understanding of the tools that are there. So here's our GitHub ones. Here's our Drupal ones. Looks good. Again, I'm just giving it all of the Drupal tools right now. It might be that you create multiple servers that are focused on different things, whether that be content creation or site building or tools that you use around site maintenance, and you can enable and disable those as necessary. But for this demo, I'm just saying here's every single tool. Good luck. One of the things I'll mention is the more tools you add, The more challenges I would say there is in terms of it being reliable and dependable, because it does have so many tools to choose from, that sometimes that can be a lot of noise for the assistant to be successful. But because we don't have a ton of tools yet in general, I think we're still well within the means of it being successful for our ask. I'm going to give it an initial prompt, and as it's churning on this a bit, let's talk about what's in here. So I'm going to tell it to create a release notes in the Drupal site. I want it to be the Drupal AI repo. This is the specific tag. I wanted to include that high-level summary paragraph in the overview of the release note. I also wanted to create a list of individual issues, commit messages. It needs to include the issue ID, the message, and a link to commit itself. And then in Drupal, it should be an unpublished release note, and it needs to save it. So it's going to start calling tools both on the GitHub side as well as on the Drupal side. Sometimes these will fail. That's completely okay. And you're going to see that happen. And what's cool about MCP or AI in general is when it fails, it's going to look and see that or that message, that error message that comes back to it, and it's going to try to self-correct. And that's kind of the fun in watching this. So first it tries to get tag details. Something fails here. It then goes and just searches the repositories and like, am I even on the right thing? Okay, I found the repository he must be talking about. Then it goes and gets the tag details again. It lists the individual commits. It jumps over to the Drupal side and it starts to understand the actual entity setup. It does a call to the entity list for taxonomy terms to see if there's a taxonomy term for this project already. In this case, it found it, so it has one to point to and it doesn't need to create the term. It then goes and creates the actual release note node. Now, when it does this, it's creating the node in an unsaved state. And I did this intentionally because what I found in testing is that when you have tools that are too big, reliability really goes down. And so if I had one entity create node tool that you had to submit all of the field data into once and one field failed, then it would fail the entire thing and have to keep calling it. And the chances of it messing up with all that additional context are very high. So what I found for me in particular is small tools are successful tools. So I tell it to create the node with just the basic information that's unique to an entity node in Drupal, which is the title, the type, and status. It could also be things like sticky to top of page and so forth. That's all available to it, but I didn't ask it to do anything beyond the default for those. It then goes through and starts calling the individual field set values. So here's that release tag that is just that plain text version field. Here's the field project that points to that taxonomy term. Here's my summary for that overview field. And now it's doing the actual issues field. Something to point out here with issues is that this is a very large field because there were so many issues that went into this release. So this one definitely will take the longest. And it doesn't help either that I asked it to include links to the commit messages, which just makes that amount of information that it's passing to this that much longer, which is why this one will take a little while. While it's doing this, let's jump over to the GitHub side to see what this looks like. So this is the project that I mentioned before. We're going to go into tags. We're going to go into beta 1. So something I'm going to call out here is that because this project's well maintained, has a lot of contributors, and is just much better managed than the next project I'm going to show you, I've already got release notes here, and I'm sure that it's going to use this for parts of what it's doing. When I do this again, I'm going to do this in the follow-up demo that I'm going to give shortly. I'm going to do this without these, so that it has to come up with all of these on its own as well. But what I am asking it to do is summarize this into an easier to understand summary, like a paragraph at the top of the page. And I'm also asking it to attach the commit message to these. So it is doing work on top of this, even though some of this work's been done for us already. So let's jump back over here. It looks like it finished setting that and then it saved it. So we'll jump into our Drupal site. I'm going to go to the content page. I see my page here. Let's click edit. I've tagged that project. I've got my release tag. I've got the overview. And then I've got the full list here of everything that's been done and is going into this release. And then let's view it. And as you can see, I've got a breakout of everything, including links to those individual commit messages, which is what AI is appended to this. So let's do this a test again, but let's do it on something different. And in this case, it's going to be that example that I mentioned with smart content. I'm going to ask it to do it on 3.0.0. And I'm going to specify to only show changes since RC1. And the reason I'm doing that is because sometimes when it sees a major change, it's like, oh, I should show all the changes since 2.0 and skip the RCs and the betas and the alphas. But in this case, I want to keep it narrow and just say since the last release, just focus on that. So again, it's going to search the repository. It's going to list tags. It's going to go through all the motions again. But when we look over here, on 3.0.0, you'll notice none of that release information is on here the same way there was on the AI one. So it's actually got to come up with this itself. And so this, I think, is where it's pretty impressive that it's able to like navigate and figure this stuff out. And if I jump into the project itself, we can look at the commits, and what it should be doing is there's essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 commits that it should be finding and communicating on. So we'll go back over here. It's working through GitHub. It's looking through the project taxonomy terms and figuring out what it needs there. The GitHub step is taking a little bit longer, I think, because it has to do a little bit more of the legwork on its own. It creates a taxonomy term because that smart content project is not currently in, was not currently in the vocabulary for projects. So it's adding that in. It's creating the node for the release note. It's going through and setting individual field values. And one thing I'm going to call out too is if you'll notice, obviously my prompt was a lot shorter here. Generally what I've seen is I'm continuing from the same conversation. So it's going to just kind of pick up from where it left off in the last one and keep the format alive that I was asking previously. Sometimes it might be that if you were to start a brand new conversation and do this, you would want to tell it. Again, if you're not using an agent that's describing all that, you would either need to give it that context again, or turn on long-term history in Claude, or even tell it to go look at some other release notes to understand the structure. And it can do that. And it might be a quick way to get to make sure your format of your release notes is consistent. So it went ahead and set those field values. I don't have as many issues on this one, so it went a lot quicker. It then saved it. If we look over on the Drupal side, I've got my smart content 3.0 release. Click into here, tag, description, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Everything's matching up there. We can click into some of these. This is additional form CSS cleanup. We know this is our additional form CSS cleanup. So it's pulling all those in. It's getting our format as expected. Awesome. Then let's do one more test. We're going to make one more release here. And this will just show now using the same exact project. I'm going to essentially ask it to do the commits since this essentially sequentially from the previous release I just had. Again, my prompt can be even shorter because it's got more context. It understands to only go back, one release. I don't need to explain any of that. It's going to list the commits again, create the node, set field value, set field value. Let's jump over here. Let's go to my tags, 3.1.0. In this case, I should only have 2 commits that it's tracking. So imagine it's done by now. No, not yet. Looks like it's writing up that list issues field. It's saving it now. Now it's done. So we have 3.1.0. It's describing those changes. And then we've got our 2 issues that have been fixed and links to them as well. So this is a very basic level of this. I imagine you could, obviously plug this into some sort of workflow. It could happen automatically. You could have a lot more rules around exactly how it should display, and you could even have agents that double check and confirm that the messages are accurately describing things. It could dig into the code and make sure that it's accurately described. I think you could take this so much further, but this gives you pretty much a high level, just plugging in an assistant to not only Drupal to create the content and understand my Drupal site so that it can make changes on that side. Also plugging it to the GitHub side so it can retrieve context and connect those 2 things together. So thanks for everyone for joining today. I'm going to be releasing more demos, continuing to push this further and further. I'm also going to be releasing a video soon around just getting this set up on your own site so that you can start playing around with it as well. Appreciate your time today, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.